All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Brett McDonald, and I am the marketing manager for Vance Glazing. And joining me today is James Satterwhite, who is our CEO. Today, we're going to be talking about ASHRAE 90.1 building constraints. And I have a few questions for James today that he'll be able to shed some light on. So the first question I'm going to ask is, could you give the audience a brief explanation of Vance Glazing Limited?
Sure, thanks, Brett. Be happy to. So Advanced Glazing is about a 20-year-old company. Our discipline and our skill is around managing daylight and moving daylight deeper into spaces and doing so with life of the building products. We've got a history that's born of light management and insulation performance for facades. And we've got, in 20 years, we've built quite a large arsenal of both completed work as well as skill and knowledge base around actually solving a lot of the issues that come along with daylighting for facades and slope glazing on buildings. So we have a long track record of success, and we have a long track record of saving a lot of projects in the very early phases of design by instigating a really strong backbone of modeling services that allow the architects to do iterative planning for how light management actually can be done in a way that's really smart because it's very early. And we dedicate a lot of resources in not just making products, but also in providing services to the design community to aid them in designing beautiful buildings like, you know, you're in the presence of, and you're in my mock office or in the presence of as well. So we are a very proud group of people, and we're a very proud company with a long tradition of being involved in numbers of really iconic and beautiful buildings, but also in literally hundreds of wonderful educational facilities at every level from K through 12 up through higher education, government centers, museums, and the like. Anywhere where you can think where natural daylighting used properly can make a big difference in terms of the building quality and in terms of the user experience. That's what we get up to do every day of the week for people.
That's an excellent answer, and I think that covers almost everything that we do. So thank you for that. All right, Jim, moving on to the next question. What are the concerns that architectural firms face when they are trying to meet ASHRAE 90.1 building performance requirements?
That's a big question, because it's a big mouthful of an answer as well. And I'd say if you take it down to its basic point, it's losing control of the building and losing control of the design rhythm that they're looking for, losing control of getting the interiors where they want them to be, because they are actually, it's a funny thing because this has been brewing out in the general industry for a long time. As sustainability has grown in popularity in culture and all the rest, there's been this groundswell of people seeking energy management, better energy management, sustainable design, all the rest of those things, which has come to the point now to where it is not just a wave, it is actually mandated. And that's what ASHRAE 90.1 and a few other model codes actually mandate. And really what they're all about is addressing the core weakness in facade design on buildings. And weakness not being design or technology or all the rest of that, it's just the very materials of construction are not intuitively highly thermally efficient, I think is a nice way to say it. They really don't do a good job of insulating buildings. Anything that's light transmissive is literally a hole in the wall in many instances due to the poor thermal performance of the material. And it just has to do with the fact that the materials of construction and the construct methods, because they have to satisfy a bunch of different requirements, are all thermally conductive materials. And when you put those together and expect them to insulate, it becomes a problem. And the industry generally has struggled with making anything other than incremental changes in terms of the actual performance of these materials and systems. And so what's happened is that these codes have now come and become mandated, and they've far surpassed what the industry has been able to match the requirements to. So in order to meet these requirements, these codes are written in such a way that you either have a prescriptive construct method or you have a performance guideline that you have to meet. The prescriptive performance level goes right at the heart of the problem. It says, you're going to meet this prescriptive requirement. You can't have more than 30% windows, and the balance of the facade has to be solid construction, AKA poor performing glass and much better performing solid materials. That's one pathway to solving the problem. The other pathway is the performance base, which can be done, takes a lot more man hours, a lot more planning, and a lot more resources to figure out how to balance the energy performance over a much broader scale or broader spectrum of the building to be able to prove that you're complying with the intent of the code. One is very resource intensive, one is not. The one that is prescriptive is it's taking control of the design. It's taking away the control of the facade or the design rhythm of the facade and the rest of it, because it's you're being told that's all you can do. The other is just much more laborious way to go about trying to figure it out. Most buildings that you're seeing that are built today with lots of glass still in this environment go through really large efforts to try to solve the problem of that poor performing glass with other areas in the building. So that's really the heart of what the problem is. Now, the result of all of that is if prescriptive codes are actually what's driving the decision-making process, you're doing several things. You're reducing views from the building. You're reducing daylight as a lighting source to the interior. So it's actually counter to the energy side of things if daylighting is done correctly. So you're doing those things, and you're redoing the design language of the entire building. It's a lot different to see punched openings on a building than it is large glass facades or large facades of glass with some opacity to them. So you're reducing daylighting, you're improving thermal efficiency on one spectrum, you're not on another, but you are meeting that prescriptive mandate. The other part of doing that is you're actually increasing the potential for glare on the insides of the buildings, because punched openings yield higher levels of contrast within the building, so you're not managing the light well. And what that introduces is a further problem, which is window shades and things like that that have to go in to manage the glare. Whereas if you're able to manage glare by moving light far enough into spaces and around in spaces, you can actually minimize the need to put blinds on windows, which gets, you're getting everything when you can do that. You're getting views, you're getting daylighting, you're getting energy efficiency if you're doing it right. It's a complicated new world for people to have to deal with, and where governments have mandated the compliance with it, which is becoming the norm now. This is on every architect's mind these days with everything that they're doing. This creates a real need for understanding of it, and also for materials and methods and application processes which can address the problem for the design community.
Where would where are some places that would struggle a lot with these constraints?
Where, in what kind of do you mean a geographical sense, Brett, or do you mean a type of a building? What do you mean?
Yeah, geographical sense. Where in the world would people struggle with this the most?
Well, they struggle with it the most in the cooler northern climes than they would in the southern climes, because in the southern climes it's more about solar heat gain, less about insulation, and it's a different struggle. Both areas have issues with it, but most of the areas that have mandated it, if you haven't seen it, and that might be something that would be helpful for this audience to show a chart of the adoption of this, and you'll notice that it's western portions of the country, pretty much along the northern portions of the country, and a bit on the Atlantic seaboard, and pretty much all across Canada as well.
Okay, excellent. I answered this really well.
Okay.
All right, so this moves into our next question. How can Vance Glazens Limited ease these concerns?
Good question. Multiple methods. In order, if you recall what I was saying about the poor performance of the facade, to get over the poor performance of the facade, you've got a couple of choices. You've either got to drastically improve the performance of the aluminum component or drastically improve the component of the glass. Aluminum is a really difficult thing to improve on because it's just really highly thermally conductive. And there are incremental levels of improvement that are made by very good systems manufacturers in the market. But the performance improvements are incremental, and they're also very cost additive and add a lot of complexity to these. That brings us over to the glass side. The glass side, in order for glass to improve performance, you either got to drastically improve the thermal performance of the glass assembly, or you've got to do it a different way to do it. And the only way that vision glass classically can improve the thermal performance to a drastic level is move into vacuum insulated glass, which there's a whole lot of technical and capital reasons why that is really lagging in terms of viability, because it's very expensive to tool for. It's a drastically different process of putting things together. So that's been relegated really to small window openings, so it doesn't really have a home in facades yet. And the other is to do things like Advanced Glazings does with our Solera branded products, where we're actually incorporating aerogel insulation into the glass, which does provide a drastic improvement to the actual thermal capability of the glass. And interestingly enough, it allows for the ability to do that while preserving views and preserving daylight in a very unique, but very, very timely manner.
All right. Can you give us an example of a project that Advanced Glazens worked on where we had to use a very high R value alongside vision glass?
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's growing into quite a large number these days, which is really good for us. It's good for the design community as well. So happy to do so. One I can point to is actually this project that's right behind me here. This is a lead platinum project that was built 2 years ago. And this is in a university and higher ed facility. This facade is a very interesting story because this whole section of the building was designed to be the student commons, indoor commons area where students could gather and collaborate and hang out and do all the things that they wanted to. And the owner mandated that this space needed to be very light and lively and a really inviting space to be in. The architect designed this all glass facade, which actually normally a lot of people think of doing that facade to bring a lot of light in. Has a couple of other things that come along with it. But anyway, so the facade was designed using all high performance, low E vision glass. Created a couple of problems with the overall design intent. One was it couldn't allow them to get the insulation where they needed to get it to meet the LEED requirements and or to meet the code requirements that were in play for it. Problem number one. Problem number two was the amount of glare coming into the space with that large amount of clear glass, especially to this relatively small interior volume, was excessive. And the only way to solve it in a large span like that was with mechanical shades going onto it. That eliminated the daylighting benefit that the owner wanted because they would have had to been closed a lot of the time. It had a secondary problem for it, is that it was very expensive to do that to it. But the fact that they didn't meet the daylighting requirements and they didn't meet the insulation requirements really opened up an avenue for this better way of thinking about doing these kinds of spaces. So this was modeled using our services, our daylight modeling services. First off, to come up with a strategic means of laying out a combination of these daylighting, engineered daylighting diffusers, which is what Solera is, and the vision glass to give views everywhere that views were needed and wanted and desired. And to use the balance of it for two purposes: improving insulation, and the other was to increase the amount of interior illumination in the building. And you can see what happened here is this has been the use of the daylighting panels themselves to eliminate the need for window blinds. There's no window blinds in this project at all. And that's because these engineered diffusers scatter light upwards, downwards, and outwards uniformly. And they take away from the contrast capability of the vision glass to the level where you can't, there's not enough contrast there to cause discomfort to the people on the interior. That also opened up the ability to blend the Solera in two different insulation values. 50% of the facade is done in high performance low E vision glass. The balance of it is done predominantly with our R18 glass, which is very highly insulating compared to normal glass. And the balance with an R5 there to get the overall performance of the facade where it needed to get to meet the LEED requirements and the code requirements. And the good news about all of this on the backside is that all the daylighting mandates were met. All of the code mandates were met, and it saved the owner a lot of money in terms of the construction. So it's a win-win for everybody. The designer, they got what they wanted. They weren't being compromised by the building codes. The owner got what they wanted, both on first cost as well as operational costs in the long term, and preserved just a very, very beautiful space. And there's a growing list of these types of applications where these are being blended in a very, very effective way. It's a good statement back to using these modeling services and these consulting services early in the process to make sure that you're getting what you're needing.
That was an excellent answer, Jim. All right, so this is the last question. If the viewer wants to learn anything more about what we offer, where could they go to learn more?
Well, there's actually a lot of places that they could go, but I would just say, talk to us. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. There's obviously the website that we have, advanceglazings.com. It was built with the architect in mind, the designer, the engineer, all of the above. There's an enormous amount of resources there. Best though to actually just reach out. We have a spot in the website where you can either just directly call us, engage with us, send in a request for information, and or even better, if you're really interested in learning more about these topics, is let's schedule a AIA CES HSW presentation for you. We have a very, very enlightening, very instructive suite of presentations that actually are designed again to help inform and do a lot of the things that we talked about in this particular case study that you mentioned earlier. But engage, you'll actually enjoy the experience of working with Advanced Glazings.
All right, thank you.